Welcome back to the CrossRoads Diner, the place your spirit goes when it might be time to change direction. Hey everybody, welcome back to the CrossRoads Diner. This is your old buddy Steve McCurdy, and Terry Tucker's in the diner with me today. Welcome, Terry. Good to have you here.
Well, thanks for having me on, Steve. I'm looking forward to talking with you.
What part of the world are you in right now?
Denver, Colorado.
Oh, you poor baby.
Yes, it's terrible.
That's great. Terry, give us a little overview. Tell us a little bit about yourself. Give us the elevator resume so folks know a little bit about you.
Sure. Born and raised on the south side of Chicago. I'm the oldest of three boys. You can't tell this from looking at me or from my voice, but I'm 6'8" tall, and I played college basketball at the Citadel in Charleston, South Carolina, despite having 3 knee surgeries in high school. When I graduated from college, I moved home to find a job. I'm really going to date myself now, but this was long before the internet was available to help people find a job. Fortunately, I found that first job in the corporate headquarters of Wendy's International, the hamburger chain, in the marketing department. Unfortunately, I lived with my parents for the next 3.5 years as I helped my mother care for my father and my grandmother, who were both dying of different forms of cancer. Professionally, as I said, started out at Wendy's, became a hospital administrator after that, and then made a major pivot in my life and became a police officer. And part of what I did with that is I was a SWAT team hostage negotiator.
Oh, man.
After my law enforcement career, I started a school security consulting business, coached girls high school basketball when we lived in Houston, became an author in 2020, but for the last almost 11 years now, I've been dealing with this rare form of cancer. And then finally, my wife and I have been married for almost 30 years. We have one child, a daughter, who's a graduate of the United States Air Force Academy and is an officer in the new branch of the military, the Space Force.
Outstanding. Well, it's a hell of a story, and it goes in a lot of different directions. So you understand the principle of the CrossRoads Diner, the notion of reflection and having to be intentional about picking what's next. Some of the things that you were talking about, particularly, I really identify with taking care of your parents, and particularly in end of life situations. You're kind of not as at choice as you would like to be, except mentally, you're at choice about how you react to it, I guess. Talk to us about the places with all that different resume stuff. Some of that one thing led to another. Some of it was an intentional pivot. What's the interesting one that you want to talk to us about a little bit today that might be relevant to our folks who are at a place and are trying to figure out what to do next?
Yeah, I guess, I've thought about that. Do I want to talk about my cancer journey? There's certainly a lot to unpack there, but sure. I think really what I would like to talk about is taking care of my father. I was in a situation where my grandfather, his father, was a Chicago police officer from 1924 to 1954 and was actually shot in the line of duty with his own gun. It was not a serious injury. He was shot in the ankle, but it was 1933. And let's face it, trauma medicine in 1933 was a whole lot different than trauma medicine today. So when I expressed an interest in going into law enforcement, my father was absolutely not. You're going to go to college. You're going to major in business. You're going to get out, get a great job, get married, have 2.4 kids, and live happily ever after. But that's what my father wanted. Yeah, that's what my father wanted me to do. That wasn't what I felt my purpose or my passion in life was. So when I graduated from college, I had.
So did you know that at the time? Is that why you were so convicted? Is you knew that you had something driving you that was very different from him? Or was that a rebellion issue for you?
No, it wasn't a rebellion issue. And I knew why he wanted that for me.
Your safety, sure.
My grandfather was in Chicago during, Prohibition, when alcohol was outlawed in the United States, during the Great Depression in the late 20s and early 30s, and when the gangs, Al Capone and those guys were shooting up the city. So my dad was like, no, I don't want that for you. I want something what he determined to be better. And I know a lot of people in life face that, where there's a significant person in their life, their parents, their uncle, their sibling or something that, say, no, Dad, you should do this, or no, son, you should do that, and you really kind of like you talked about the four purposes, when you at the CrossRoads Diner, there's Lucifer on one shoulder, and there's the good angel on the other. And what do you do? What should you do, in regard to your purpose in life? And so I had a choice when I graduated from college. I could have said, sorry, Dad, I'm going to go blaze my own trail. I'm going to do my own thing.
Right.
Or out of love and respect for you, I will do what you want me to do, and I will go into business. So understanding that backstory, my resume makes a little bit more sense now.
Yeah. Yeah. So, so talk to me about a decision that was hard to make, that you weren't sure, it wasn't clear to you exactly what the right way to go was. You knew what your purpose was, you knew yourself, but you didn't really quite know of the options available to you what was the truest direction. Do you have one of those?
I don't. I have more one of those when I was younger, when I was in high school, when I was being recruited to play basketball. I had initially taken a visit to the University of Toledo, had been offered a scholarship to play for Toledo, was in the Mid-American Conference, close enough to Chicago where my family could have come to visit me, and seen games, but, still far enough away that, I was trying to figure out my life. And so I was all excited. I'm like, great, I've made my visit. I'm going to go to the University of Toledo. And 2 weeks after I got back from the visit, I got a call from them and said, not so sure we have a scholarship for you. And I'm like, oh, okay. Well, we'll call you back in a week or two and let you know if we do. Well, they called back about 2 weeks later and said, oh, we've got a scholarship for you. And I was dumb. I was naive. I was not, emotionally mature by any means. I was a kid. And, my dad said to me, well, what did they say? So, well, they offered me the scholarship again. And my dad said, do you want to play for somebody who offers you something and then takes it back and then offers it to you again? What does that say about their character? And I mean, as a 17-year-old kid, character, what's that? That's something, that's something that's in a play, right? A character's in a play. I didn't understand character or integrity or anything like that. And so, he said, do you want to play? And so it started me down that road of thinking, is that what I want to do? And eventually I got to the point where, no, I don't want to play for somebody like that. Right. And so the Citadel, Les Robinson was the coach at the time, had offered me a scholarship as well. But that was 1,000 miles from Chicago. That was Charleston, South Carolina. Yeah. And I knew nobody there. Nobody would ever come and see me play. And I ended up taking that. I ended up going there. It was the best decision I ever made. It was the hardest decision I ever made. And I learned a ton because I was going to quit. There was I was walking over to quit because they shave your head. It's a military school. They shave your head. It's like going through boot camp. I'd had 3 knee surgeries in high school. My knee was killing me. I'm like, the heck with this. I'm going to quit. I said, but you know what? I'm going to stop by the student union and see if there's any mail. And I had a 7-page handwritten letter from my father. And I took that letter and I went up to the rafters of the field house and I'm 50 feet away from the coach's office and I'm reading that letter. And it's, I'm proud of you. You've overcome these knee surgeries. I love you. But you've called home 7 times since you've been there and not once have you asked about anybody else. You are so in your head. Basically pull your head out of your butt and realize the opportunity that you have in front of you. And by the end of the letter, I am crying like a baby. Yeah. I'm like, you know what? I can't quit now. And 4 years later, I ended up graduating.
I love stories like that. I love accountability things. Someone who loves you, knows you, and then holds up a very honest mirror to where you are right now and that you're better than that and calls you to your higher self. I think those are remarkable things. I never really knew my biological father. My mother and he were getting a divorce when they realized I was coming. So I saw him a couple of times and he was a heroic figure. He was John Wayne. He was 6'7", very romantic character. And then I didn't see him for many years. And then when I graduated from high school, I got a chance to spend most of a week with him. He was down with a leg problem, big guys and knees, you're obviously aware, that they're not really compatible. And so I had him prisoner in this bed, and we talked a lot and he asked me, it was 1968. And he said, what are you doing about your military obligation? I said, oh, I got a real high draft number. And he said, I didn't ask you what your draft number was. I asked you what you're doing about your obligation. And I thought for a long moment about it because my mom did not want me going to Vietnam or anywhere near guns and uniforms. And I was not really hot on that idea either, but I did want to be in the military at some point. And I don't know, he didn't know me. He did not know me really. But he said to me, I said, I guess I don't have to go. And I may not go. And he went, well, that is your choice. But there may come a day when, if you have not served your country in uniform, you may wish you had. And boy, the resonance of truth, that ring that you know that what just got said is absolutely true for you, rang all through that room. And my years in the Air Force were the most challenging, most difficult, most soul testing, and still to this day, 50 years later, are still the most important. So those, we come to those crossroads. We come to those places where we have to make a choice, and it's not about going for the sunshine. It's about going for the path that is most authentic and true to us, even if it's not comfortable. Congratulations on that, and congratulations on having a dad that would write you a 7-page letter and hold that mirror up to you. Good for you. Did that letter do you any good when you were a hostage negotiator?
Not so much. I mean, I still have the letter. I still have it. Great. That was when to mail a letter was 15 cents, right. It wasn't like $10 like it is today and things like that, but it was incredibly impactful. I mean, my brothers have seen it and they have read it and taken what they could out of it as well, even though it was written to me. I mean, our dad was, I've got a brother who's 6'7" who pitched for Notre Dame, another brother who's 6'6" who was drafted by the Cleveland Cavaliers in the National Basketball Association, and then my dad was 6'5". So I used to joke that if you sat behind our family in church growing up, there wasn't a prayer's chance you were going to see anything that was going on. And our mom always wanted to sit in the front row. It's like, Mom, we can't do that. People in the back aren't going to be able to see us. And, we're sitting right here. Yes, ma'am. Because Mom was always the boss.
That's true. That's true. There's no question about that. So tell me a little bit about what you're doing these days and how you are serving your intention and maybe others through that intention.
Yeah, I've had cancer for as I said, almost 11 years now. It has seen the amputation of my foot in 2018, the amputation of my leg in 2020, right in the middle of the COVID pandemic. I have tumors in my lungs that I'm treated for at the hospital every 3 weeks. So in all honesty, I'm probably coming to the end of my life, but living and not dying are two entirely different things. And that's one thing I've learned with cancer is, and I have felt so many times during this 11 years that I've really been in that not dying stage. So right now, really my goal is to put as much goodness, as much positivity, as much motivation, as much love back into the world as I possibly can with whatever time I had left. And I had a nurse recently ask me, what was it like to have your foot amputated and your knee and your leg amputated? And I told her, I said, it certainly hasn't been easy. I'm still trying to learn to walk again. I mean, let's face it, at 6'8", falling is not an option. You get hurt from that height. But what I did tell her was, cancer can take all my physical faculties, but cancer can't touch my mind, it can't touch my heart, and it can't touch my soul. And that's who I am. That's who you are, Steve. That's who everybody who's listening to us is. And this is just a vessel or a house or whatever you want to call it. I mean, I'm not telling you not to go to the gym and not eat right and do all the things we know that are important, but maybe we should spend a little more time working on our heart, our mind, and our soul and who we really are. So that's what I'm trying to do by just telling my story and the things that I've learned during this 11-year journey.
You make a remarkable point that you came from a large athletic family, and it would be very easy to have you identify as a big athlete, a big jock, and to have that taken away could create a crisis of identity and does in many people. But you determined that's not your identity. That was what you were doing. Was that rooting and clarity always there, or did that come as a result of this confrontation and this crisis?
Well, I think part of it, our parents were, they used to do what I call the divide and conquer parenting, where Terry's got a game at this time on this day, dad's going to that. Well, Larry's got practice over here, mom's going. So we were always running in a million different directions.
Right.
And I remember when I was a police officer, I saw people whose identity was tied to the gun, the badge, and the authority that they had. And They couldn't retire because if they retired, they looked at themselves. Who they were. As sort of a nobody. And so, I did a podcast about 2 months ago with a former NFL player. And this guy's like 6'6", 300 pounds. He put his forearm up on the desk at one time, and his forearm was so big it blocked out the camera. And he and I were talking afterwards, and he said, when I started this podcast, he said I was scared to death. I'm like, you're 6'6", you're 300 pounds. How are you scared to death? I mean, I don't care how big, tall, strong you are. We all have that. Am I good enough? And can I do this? Is this something? And that's thinking with our fears and our insecurities. Right. That's not thinking with our minds. That's not thinking, this would be a good thing for me. I'm gonna step outside my comfort zone and do something that's difficult, because in difficulty we grow. In comfort we don't. And he realized that, but it was just interesting for me to, I'm interviewing this guy who's in the NFL. His brother's in the National Football League Hall of Fame, and I'm thinking, you were scared? I was scared when I started being a podcast guest. So, we all have that, am I good enough? But I'm telling you, everything we need to succeed in life is already inside us. We just need to find it, pull it out, and use it to our advantage.
I had a math teacher that I did not personally have, but he was the advanced math teacher in high school. So all my smart friends had him. I was scared of him because he was bald and he was severe and he was all these things. Turns out he was a pussycat. He's the greatest guy in the world. Loved all of them desperately. But one of the things he would say when they would go to his tutorial to try to figure out how to pass trigonometry is he would listen and he would assess and he would say, Terry, you have a good mind. You have a very good mind, but you're not asking the right questions. So the answers you're coming up with aren't taking you where you want to go. And you think that you can't do it. You can do it. You just need to ask the right questions because, and this is the part that I've lived with for the last 15 years, everything you need is right around you all the time, either in plain sight where you can get it or within the soul and spirit of someone right around you. And you have to be vulnerable and open and honest so that person has a chance to go, I think I've got something you might need. And I think that, you got this NFL guy that's, is got a zip code for, an identity, and he's got fear. Him confessing that fear was a very courageous act for him because that's out of touch with expectation. And didn't your respect and admiration for him blossom as a result of that and your feeling of safety with him?
It did, but it wasn't until after the podcast that we were just kind of going back and forth about our experiences
right.
on podcasts and him hosting. And he was like, when I first thought about doing it, I'm like, who's going to want to, listen to me? I'm just an NFL, and we all kind of have that identity of, am I good enough? Am I strong enough? Am I smart enough? What are people going to say if I fail? And when I speak to young people, especially, I always tell them, if there's something in your heart, something in your soul that you believe you're supposed to do, but it scares you, go ahead and do it. Because at the end of your life, the things you're going to regret are not going to be the things you did. They're going to be the things you didn't do. And by then it's going to be too late to go back and do them. So yes, I did respect him immensely. And it made me feel a lot better too, that, here's this NFL player whose brother's in the Hall of Fame that was like, yeah, I was scared. Well, me too. Okay, good.
Well, you make an outstanding point, and I'm really, really glad that you brought this up, that legacy is almost always about safe choices that we made when we should have been a little bit more courageous. And, you're at a place where you've gone from being remarkably physically capable to having limitations, and yet you still are striving toward getting a message out. There is a legacy of action, support, and encouragement that I hear in your message. And thank you for that. That's wonderful. When my audience is frequently folks who have become aware that for some time they've needed to do something, and it's easier sometimes to maintain status quo than to rock the boat because you got responsibilities, you got people around you. You've planted a flag. And what would you say to those folks about the way to go about coming to terms with who they are and what they need to be doing, regardless of circumstance?
I'll tell you a story that I think illustrates that.
Okay.
When I was at the Citadel one year, we had a president by the name of James Bond Stockdale. I don't know if that name rings a bell for you at all, but Admiral Stockdale was the highest ranking POW in the Hanoi Hilton, one of the most horrible prisoner of war camps during the Vietnam War. Won the Medal of Honor, was a Medal of Honor winner. And
Wow.
I didn't have a lot of interaction with him, but I was at an event one time and he was talking. And somebody asked him, who are the people that survived that brutal, camp and were tortured unmercifully? And he said, the big, tall, strong, tough guys that thought they could handle any kind of torture were not the people that survived. He said, even the optimists, the people that thought, hey, we'll be released by Christmas or Thanksgiving or Easter or whatever, and then Christmas and Thanksgiving and Easter would come and they wouldn't be released. And so they would die of a broken heart. He said the people that were really able to survive that were the people that understood what they could control, which according to him was only their breathing and their thoughts, and controlled it. And he said, and that goes so counterintuitive, as long as you're optimistic, no, it wasn't. What can you control in your life and how can you use that for your benefit? I've always believed we have a breaking point. We all have this point where I can't do it anymore. But that breaking point, at least I've learned this through cancer, is so much further down the road than we ever give ourselves credit for. We quit so quickly. Whenever we butt up against an impediment, you know what? I can't get over it, so I'm going to quit. But we just don't quit. Now we got to blame somebody. We've got to blame our parents or our station in life or, our boss or whatever it ends up being. Very few people take personal responsibility for their own success and happidness. So that's what I tell people. Like, you know what? You can do so much more than you think you can. I don't care how tired you are. I don't care how miserable you are. Your breaking point is way down the road. Don't even think about quitting and understand that nobody's coming to your rescue. Nobody cares. It's all up to you. Understand that you need to take responsibility for what makes you happy and what you believe will make you successful in life.
Outstanding. Very, very good summation. My grandmother was a salt of the earth, third grade graduate, kind of person. And she would say to me, Stevie, God's not going to give you more than you can handle, but you're going to be very disappointed in how much faith God has in you. You're going to get tested. It's going to go a long way. Tell us the message. How do people follow you, your message? How would you have them reach out to learn about you?
Sure. So I have a blog called Motivational Check, and every day I put up a thought for the day. And with that thought usually comes a question about how maybe you can apply that in your life. Also on the blog, I have recommendations for books to read, videos to watch. My social media links are there, access to my book, and you can leave me a message. So that's all at motivationalcheck.com.
Say it again.
Motivationalcheck.com.
Great. We'll put that in the notes with a link to you. And maybe the next time you and I visit, we'll talk a little bit more about the sustainable excellence idea.
I love it. That'd be great.
Yeah, that'd be cool. Thank you for being on. I really appreciate you coming and being in the diner with us today.
Well, Steve, thanks for having me. It was a lot of fun.
That's great. Next up on Monday, John and I go back into the nuts and bolts of trying to examine this thing and figure out who are you and where are you in the journey. guys like Terry you can tell that he's done a lot of that work, and it becomes a foundation from which he can make all of his decisions. Be with us each and every Thursday as we look at a case study of an individual who spent some time in the diner discovering what's next for them. And on Mondays, join us when John and I take a look at the nuts and bolts of determining your purpose, your vision, your mission, and your action plan. Be with us in the CrossRoads Diner, where your spirit goes when it's time to change direction.